Joining us now, Sidney Powell. She is a noted lawyer. She was a prosecutor. She worked in the Justice Department. She's the author of the best-selling book, A License to Lie. You can buy that. Go to alicense2lie.com, and it's all right there. You don't have to do Amazon or any of that. Just go right to her site. And she is with us now. Sidney, great to have you with us.
Thank you, John. Always good to be with you.
Well, I was excited to have you on,
I can't believe you're out there in the Middle East.
Yeah, we're out here in the Middle East on assignment, and we'll be doing our thing. But I really wanted to get your take here on the kind of bombshell things that went on Friday. You had the Mueller bombshell with Michael Cohen saying that he had cooperated. You had Michael Flynn. Now you've got some other stuff coming out. So I want to look at what they have, what they're saying they have, what the Mueller team has, and get your take on it. Will that be all right?
Well, they're actually saying that Cohen did not cooperate. They're very mad at him for not cooperating. In fact, they're saying that he cooperated very little, and that's why they're opposing all but the smallest reduction in his sentencing guidelines.
Well, let's break this down, okay? So we now know that several Russian officials reached out to about a half dozen Republicans that were kind of loosely tied to the campaign. And then, but there was also his eldest son, Don Jr., his closest advisor, his lawyer.
And there's nothing wrong with the Russians reaching out to anybody, and there's nothing wrong with talking to Russians.
So even when
it's not a crime to speak to Russians.
Even when they said they wanted to create a synergy, what did you make of that?
That's no big deal.
Why?
Well, there's, an incoming administration or even a campaign is going to want to have a relationship with people from other countries. There's nothing illegal with that. And to call it a synergy that's like the whole collusion narrative. They want to make something sound bad when there's nothing wrong with that at all.
And what about the 12 Russian intelligence officers that got indicted for hacking into the DNC and then releasing the WikiLeaks emails?
Yes. Well, there's a whole nother question about whether that's actually what happened at all or not. And there may be something that comes of that later. I read something over the weekend that said that the DNC could not have been hacked from the outside because of the speed at which the information was downloaded. It would have been impossible to have been hacked from the outside. It'll be interesting to see if the mainstream media actually reports anything on that and whether that develops and whether that case actually gets prosecuted. Mueller also indicted a company that doesn't even exist. So I think there's a whole lot that still remains to be learned about any prosecution of actual Russians with respect to any of that.
What you're saying is that had to be an inside job then?
It could very well have been. I think that is entirely possible and most likely what happened.
All right, so now we know that Trump associates, I don't know if you call them associates, people that knew him, Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi attempted to get in touch with WikiLeaks, and now they're under investigation as to whether or not they had knowledge about the email dumps. Is that problematic?
That is so far afield from any sort of anything that Mr. Mueller is supposed to be investigating. It's almost laughable. I mean, Jerome Corsi is a journalist. Roger Stone, I'm not even sure what to call Mr. Stone, but they were both speculating based on information that was in the public domain. There's no evidence that they contacted anyone with respect to WikiLeaks at all. The timeline doesn't add up. And for people to try to draw anything from that is bizarre.
Right, because the timeline doesn't work and it was already out there. Okay, now what about this meeting in the Trump Tower where Don Jr.'s publicist from the beauty pageant or something in Moscow said, hey, we want to have this meeting, and they've got dirt on Clinton, and Don Jr. emails back, great, sounds good, can't wait. And they have the meeting, and it was really about a lawyer that was doing some lobbying that wanted her agenda done, and they got 10 minutes into it and ended the meeting. I failed to
Clinton thing. That was the same line that Misford used and Halper used. That was the line that everybody used that were FBI or CIA lures, they called them, that Peter Strzok called them in his texts and everything, that they were running deliberately against the campaign to try to set them up. And, of course, we know that the lawyer that met with Don Jr. in the Trump Tower meeting met with Fusion GPS both before and after the Trump Tower meeting. So that was all part of the FBI-CIA attempt to set up, or Fusion GPS's attempt to set up the Trump campaign. It's absolutely appalling the lengths to which our own intelligence community went to with Fusion GPS and the Clinton campaign to try to destroy the Trump campaign. And that is the real crime. And I am so furious that nobody is investigating the real crime here. I cannot see straight.
So, Sidney Powell, why doesn't the president release the FISA document? Just release it. Right, he has it. He's threatened to release it. Why doesn't he just release it?
I don't know. It would just end all of this.
Right, because then people could see it for what it is, right?
Exactly.
All right,
probably because he's been threatened with obstruction of justice or something. If he releases the document, then isn't that quite the ploy? Because to think that releasing the truth, to think that our intelligence community can hide its own criminal conduct under a classification scheme and then threaten somebody with obstruction of justice if they tell the truth. And that's exactly what's going on here. And no telling how many people they've done that to.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. We're with Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell is the author of the best-selling book, Licensed to Lie. This is a must-read, and you can buy it on our website. Just go to licensedtolie.com. You don't have to go through Amazon or anything else. Licensedtolie.com, and buy that. It is a great read. I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to put it down. And it's so much more relevant today because of what's happening. So you'll be able to see some of the players involved in it.
Yeah, and it came out in 2014, but foretold all of this stuff, and they call it Mueller's playbook.
It really did. If you're reading it now, I first read it before any of this happened, and I was like, wow. I was reading it and applying it to the Bob McDonnell fiasco in Virginia, which was kind of a subplot to it. But now you look at what's going on now, and your book is a prophecy, really is what it is, because it told you what had happened and what was going to happen, and it's all playing out. Now, the president is running for president. He's a businessman. He's not a politician. He's not paid by the government. He's not paid by the state of Ohio as governor. He's not a congressman or a senator. He's a businessman. He's running for president, and he's running a business. And while he's running for president, he's also running his business. And during that time, everybody was telling him he couldn't win, right? There was not a single pundit in the United States except me who was saying you cannot win, who was saying that you can win. They were all saying you're going to lose. So he continues to run his business. And part of the business was trying to get a deal for a tower in Moscow. And part of that deal was they had to get approval from the Kremlin. And part of that deal is they offered the head of the Kremlin a $500,000 free penthouse if they could get the ordinance for the tower, which is what you do in Staten Island. I mean, you give things to people. You make deals to get what you want. What's the problem here?
I don't know that it's for certain that offer was actually made, but I do know that Mr. Trump shut down any prospect of building the tower as soon as he decided to run for president. And that was long before the last anybody in the campaign actually continued to discuss it. So he had shut it down in January of that year. Somebody else, not in the campaign but in the company, was continuing to discuss it after that. But that's what Cohen got hung up in front of Congress, because apparently there were some discussions after the president or Mr. Trump had said, we're not doing it. Somebody else continued to talk about it, but he had made it real clear it wasn't going to happen.
So Michael
again,
Cohen,
there's no there other than Cohen getting his timeline mixed up. And I question whether his false statements to Congress in that regard were material, because it was only about the timing of when somebody else continued to have any sort of conversation about it.
So basically, okay, so the bottom line is that the president was trying to negotiate a tower. He ran for president. And shortly thereafter,
they were discussing the possibility. I don't think I'm not sure I would even call it negotiating a tower.
They were like they do in many business ventures, right? This is many business ventures that they do. This isn't new. And of course, Michael Cohen, working on commission, wanted it to see it into fruition so he could get paid. Not out of the ordinary either. So there's nothing here that's out of the ordinary. This is why I don't understand what Mueller is talking about. There's nothing here. And so that fell by the wayside.
I don't think it got past a conversation about a possibility.
I mean, I think I saw Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky was on one of the shows Sunday that I watched. And they asked him this question, and he was so dismissive of it. It was almost like, why are you wasting my time with such a stupid question? His attitude was basically, okay, so the guy was operating his business while running for president. So? What does that have to do with anything?
Right.
You know, the other people run for president, they don't run a business, right? So they are not involved in it. They're taking money from the government. It's incredible. I mean, to the life of me, you're running for president and you're there were days on the campaign trail, Sidney, where he couldn't campaign because he had pre-scheduled meetings that he had to, make pretty big decisions on with his family on big deals that were coming down. It was a lot of money. And so he would just...
God forbid he was actually working.
He was working. I mean, he was like negotiating, working, making decisions. He had to sign off on stuff. He wanted to see all the facts and figures. I mean, the guy ran a business. So it's like these people, like they can't fathom this. It's incredible to me. Okay, Sidney Powell, let's get to the final thing. Now, the final thing is individual one. Individual one in the indictment or the suit or whatever you want to call it, brought by the Southern District of New York, the charges. They're charging Michael Cohen with having paid these two women for their silence, who allegedly Mr. Trump at the time had affairs with. So Cohen does this, and he said that he was directed to make the payments by individual A or individual one. Now, of course, in the past, the Trump organization has paid off people for silence because it's better off paying them than fighting them forever. Not uncommon what many big companies do. So what's the problem here?
It's called nuisance settlements of legal claims or lawsuits.
Right.
They're not election law violations.
And it happens all the time. And he was doing that, to protect his brand. Now, all of a sudden, it's a campaign violation. Does that mean if he cut his hair to look good for a debate, that has to be disclosed? Or if he bought a new suit? When he went to the first debate in Cleveland, if he went in with his own money to Brooks Brothers to buy a $5,000 brand new tailored perfectly fit suit because he's got a big build to go to the debate in Cleveland, and he didn't file that, should that be filed?
It's unmitigated crap.
It's baloney.
These people have gone to extraordinary lengths to try to create a crime to pin on this man, and they have even tortured what Michael Cohen did to try to pin this as a crime on Michael Cohen, so they can then try to pin something on the president. If Michael Cohen hadn't pled guilty to this, they couldn't prove it as a crime against Michael Cohen. It is crap. Now, the other offenses they've got against Michael Cohen are clear crap. The bank false statements to the bank and the tax offenses, they're clear, solid crimes against Michael Cohen. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. But the other things are crap.
So, but basically, against President Trump, they have nothing, right? Right now,
exactly.
In your opinion.
Right.
They have nothing.
Exactly. In my considered legal opinion, yes.
They have nothing. They keep, and you know, if you look at what I sent you, I think it was on Saturday or Sunday.
Oh, and by the way, John, President Obama had over $2 million in election law violations, $2 million in campaign finance violations. They handled it as a civil matter with the SEC with the Federal Elections Campaign Commission for a $375,000 fine. No question.
So what was that? Just give us an example of what some of those were.
I can't even list them all, but it involved $2 million in election law violations.
Right, and
here we're talking about $280,000 in private civil payments, which were nothing more than nuisance claims for two probably bogus settlements.
And so when John Edwards went through this, he had paid, what was her name? I just can't think of her name. I always forget her name.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
It's the one name that I always forget.
He'd had a baby with her.
Yeah, I just can't think of her name. But that payment from that lady came out of his campaign fund, and then he reimbursed his campaign fund.
Right.
And still got exonerated. This payment came from his business account. I mean, what? It came from his business account.
Was the president's private money, and the other wasn't. It was actually the National Enquirer, I think's money, which it was entitled to spend however it wanted to. So there's nothing there because they can do what they want to with it.
I mean, they're a private company, so if they feel like doing that, I mean, the thing about this Sidney,
and that conversation had started back in 2014.
I mean, yeah. I mean, my example earlier, and not only, is if Bloomberg runs for president, right? Does that mean that every single time that Bloomberg News mentions his name or puts him in an article, that they're going to have to not take that as earned media and that's got to be advertising? I mean, is that what that means? Because that would be the same thing, right? Every time Bloomberg mentions his name.
Bloomberg's a liberal. The rules don't apply to them.
Exactly is my point. Sidney, I got to go buy her book, licensedtolie.com, licensedtolie.com. Sidney, thanks for being with us.